It is March 7th, 1958, and the water of San Francisco Bay is gray and choppy. At the Mare Island Naval Shipyard, a crowd has gathered to watch a strange machine slide into the water. The vessel that breaks the surface does not look like the sleek, teardrop submarines of the future, nor does it resemble the rugged U-boat killers of the recent past. It looks wrong. It looks unfinished, or perhaps built from the parts of two different ships welded together in the dark. This is the USS Grayback. On her forward deck, two massive, bulbous cylinders dominate the silhouette. They look like aircraft hangars because that is exactly what they are. They are not designed to hold torpedoes or supplies. They are designed to hold the apocalypse. The Grayback is not a symbol of naval triumph. She is not a masterpiece of engineering that will change the world. She is, in fact, a desperate bridge between two eras that never quite connected. She is a machine built for a war that no one knew how to fight, using technology that was obsolete almost the moment the rivets cooled. Her original purpose was simple: to carry nuclear fire to the shores of the Soviet Union. But history has a strange way of repurposing its failures. The Grayback will not be remembered for the missiles she carried. She will be remembered for the men she carried. And in both roles, as a nuclear deterrent and as a covert transport, she will demand a terrible price. The story of the USS Grayback begins not with a plan, but with panic. By the mid-1950s, the United States is gripped by a profound strategic anxiety. The Soviet Union has the bomb. They are developing rockets. The American defense strategy relies heavily on long-range bombers like the B-36 and the B-52, stationed at airfields that are fixed, known, and vulnerable. The generals in the Pentagon are terrified of a Pearl Harbor scenario with nuclear weapons. If the Soviets launch a surprise first strike, they could wipe out the bomber bases in minutes. The United States needs a weapon that can survive the first hit. They need a weapon that can hide. The obvious answer is the ocean. A submarine is invisible. It moves. It cannot be targeted by a pre-planned coordinate. If you can put a nuclear missile on a submarine, you have the ultimate insurance policy. But in 1955, the Navy has a problem. They have the submarines, and they have the nuclear warheads, but they do not have a delivery system that works underwater. The technology to launch a ballistic missile from a submerged tube simply does not exist yet. The physics of igniting a rocket engine underwater are still being worked out on chalkboards. So, the Navy settles for a compromise. They decide to use what they have, a cruise missile. Specifically, the Regulus. The Regulus is not a ballistic missile. It does not arc into space and fall back to Earth at hypersonic speeds. It is, essentially, a pilotless jet airplane. It has wings, a tail, an air intake, and a turbojet engine. It flies like a fighter, subsonic and low. To carry this weapon, the Navy needs a special kind of submarine. You cannot just shove a jet airplane into a torpedo tube. You need a garage. This is the design philosophy that births the Grayback. She is built around the missiles. The two huge hangars on her bow are watertight steel caverns designed to house 2 Regulus II missiles or 4 of the smaller Regulus I missiles. The concept sounds impressive in a briefing room, a stealthy submarine surfacing off the coast of Vladivostok to launch a nuclear strike. But in practice, the Regulus system is a tactical nightmare. The fundamental flaw of the Regulus is that it requires exposure. To launch the missile, the submarine must stop. It must surface. It must expose its hull to the air and the radar of the enemy. The procedure is agonizingly slow. The Grayback has to break the surface. The crew has to rush onto the wet, slippery deck. They have to hydraulically open the massive hangar doors. They have to extend the launcher ramp. They have to rotate the missile into position. They have to fire up the jet engine and let it spool up. Then, and only then, can they fire. In a training exercise, a good crew can do this in minutes. In a war, against a Soviet coastline bristling with radar and patrol boats, 5 minutes is a lifetime. A surfaced submarine is a sitting duck. It is slow, blind, and vulnerable to everything from aircraft to destroyers. There is another problem. The Regulus missile needs guidance. Once launched, it does not just fly itself to the target. It has to be steered by radio command. This means the Grayback, or another ship or aircraft, has to stay in the area, transmitting guidance signals, acting as a beacon for every enemy receiver for miles. The strategic verdict on the Regulus program is harsh. It offers a first strike fantasy, but it fails as a deterrent. A deterrent relies on the promise of a retaliatory strike. If the Soviets launch a surprise attack, the Grayback would likely be hunting for a safe place to surface in a world that is already ending. The idea that she could surface, set up a ramp, and launch a slow-flying cruise missile while under attack is optimistic at best. Yet, the Navy builds her anyway. They build her because they have to do something. The Grayback is a placeholder. She is a multi-million-dollar stopgap designed to hold the line until the real weapon, the Polaris ballistic missile, is ready. And so, the Grayback enters service with a fatal identity crisis. She is a submarine that has to act like a surface ship to fight. She is a nuclear warrior that is incredibly easy to kill. Comparing her to the Polaris boats that would follow is instructive. A Polaris submarine stays hidden deep underwater. It hovers silently. When the order comes, it opens hatches on its back and fires missiles through the water using compressed gas. The missiles ignite only when they break the surface. The submarine never reveals itself. It fires and disappears. The Grayback has none of this elegance. She is mechanical, clunky, and loud. She represents the friction of the mid-century, where the ambition of nuclear war exceeded the grasp of naval engineering. But the Grayback is built. She is commissioned. She is sent to patrol the Pacific. For a few short years, she is the tip of the spear. Her crew trains relentlessly. They practice the drill: surface, open doors, spin up, launch, dive. They know the risks. They know that in a real war, their survival time after the first launch is measured in minutes. The Regulus missile itself is a beast. It is 30 feet long. It carries a nuclear warhead capable of leveling a city. Inside the hangars of the Grayback, the missiles sit in the dark, bathed in red light, checked and rechecked by technicians who live next to the bomb. There is a strange intimacy to this era of nuclear warfare. The weapon is not hidden in a silo in North Dakota. It is right there on the other side of a bulkhead. The crew sleeps, eats, and works within feet of a megaton of explosive power. This proximity to danger defines the Grayback. She is a ship built on the edge of acceptable risk. And soon, that risk will shift. The missiles will be taken away, but the danger will remain. By the late 1950s, the writing is already on the wall. The Polaris program is moving faster than expected. The first ballistic missile submarines are hitting the water. They are nuclear-powered, allowing them to stay submerged for months. The Grayback is diesel-electric. She has to snorkel to recharge her batteries. She is tethered to the surface by her need for air and her need to launch her clumsily designed missiles. The Grayback is obsolete before she even matures. In the grand sweep of Cold War history, the Regulus era is a blip. It is a footnote. But for the men who served on her, it is the only reality they know. They patrol the North Pacific, enduring the rough seas that make the launch procedure even more terrifying. Imagine trying to maneuver a 5-ton missile on a wet steel deck pitching 20 degrees in a freezing gale. It is a testament to the seamanship of the crew that they manage it at all. But the Navy is unsentimental. Technology marches on. The Regulus is a dead end. The hangars on the Grayback's deck, once the pride of the fleet, are about to become empty caverns. Most ships, when they lose their primary mission, are sent to the scrapyard. They are cut up for razor blades. But the Grayback has a unique quality. Those massive, awkward hangars, the very things that made her a bad missile boat, are about to make her something else entirely. The Navy realizes that a submarine with a garage is a useful thing, provided you change what you put inside the garage. If you take out the nuclear missiles, you have two large, watertight rooms that can be flooded at will. You have a space where you can store equipment, or vehicles, or people. The decision to repurpose the Grayback is not immediate. For a time, she lingers in limbo. But the world is changing. The focus of the Cold War is shifting from the potential nuclear exchange to the dirty, quiet reality of proxy wars. Vietnam is heating up. The Navy needs a way to insert commandos onto hostile shores without being seen. They look at the Grayback. They look at the empty missile hangars. And a new idea begins to take shape. It is an idea that will transform this obsolete relic into the most secretive and dangerous ship in the fleet. The missiles are gone. The nuclear fire is removed. But something darker is coming to fill the void. The Grayback is about to trade her role as a clumsy, strategic bomber for a new role as a silent assassin. And the men who will ride in her hangars are not technicians, they are SEALs. The operational life of the USS Grayback as a nuclear deterrent is brutally short. In the timeline of naval history, she is a flash in the pan. Her first successful launch of a Regulus II missile occurs in 1958, a moment of triumph for her crew and designers. But the ink is barely dry on the success reports before the cancellation order comes down. The Navy decides that the Regulus II is a waste of money. The future belongs to Polaris. For 6 years, the Grayback soldiers on, carrying the older, slower Regulus I missiles on patrols in the Western Pacific. She prowls the waters off the coast of China and the Soviet Far East, a silent threat that requires a noisy, visible launch. But by 1964, the game is up. The Polaris submarines George Washington and Ethan Allen are prowling the deep, invisible and invincible. The Regulus program is terminated. The missiles are offloaded. The guidance equipment is stripped out. The Grayback is withdrawn from service. She is a ship without a mission. At just 6 years old, she is effectively a retiree. She is placed in mothball status at the Mare Island Naval Shipyard. Her reactorless engine room goes cold. Her hangars, once the home of nuclear fire, gather dust. She sits in the reserve fleet, a gray hulk rusting alongside destroyers and cruisers that have fought their last wars. The Navy has no use for a diesel-electric missile boat with no missiles. But in the silence of her decommissioning, a strange irony begins to emerge. The very feature that made the Grayback obsolete for nuclear war, her diesel-electric propulsion, is about to make her invaluable for a different kind of conflict. The nuclear navy of the 1960s is obsessed with speed and endurance. Nuclear reactors allow submarines to stay submerged forever and drive at 30 knots without stopping. This is perfect for hunting other submarines in the deep ocean or racing across the Atlantic to hit a launch window. But nuclear reactors have a drawback. They are noisy. A reactor requires cooling pumps that must run constantly. Even at rest, a nuclear submarine emits a low-frequency hum, a sonic signature that advanced sonar can detect. A nuke boat can never truly be silent. A diesel-electric boat like the Grayback is different. When she is running on her diesel engines on the surface, she is loud. But when she dives and switches to her electric batteries, she becomes a ghost. On battery power, there are no pumps, no gears, no explosions. The only sound is the whir of the electric motors turning the shaft. And if the captain orders ultra quiet, the motors can be stopped. The Grayback can drift, or, uniquely, she can sit on the bottom. Unlike a nuclear submarine, which must always maintain buoyancy and flow over its control surfaces, a diesel boat can settle onto the seabed in shallow water. She can shut down everything: fans, motors, gyros. She becomes a rock, a hole in the water. An active sonar ping will bounce off her hull and look like a geological formation. Passive sonar hears nothing because there is nothing to hear. This capability, the ability to hide in silence in shallow coastal waters, is exactly what the naval special warfare community is looking for. By 1967, the war in Vietnam is escalating. The United States is engaged in a conflict defined not by open ocean battles, but by river deltas, coastal infiltrations, and covert insertions. The Navy SEALs and Underwater Demolition Teams, UDT, need a way to get into enemy territory without being seen. Surface boats are too visible. Helicopters are too loud. They need a submarine. But modern nuclear attack submarines are too big and too valuable to risk in shallow water. You don't take a $100 million Sturgeon-class sub and park it in 50 feet of muddy water off the coast of North Vietnam. It's a misuse of assets. So, the Navy remembers the Grayback. They remember the hangars. Those massive, empty steel cylinders on her bow are perfect. They are dry. They are accessible from inside the submarine. And they are already plumbed to be floodable. In 1967, the decision is made. The Grayback will be pulled out of mothballs and converted into an amphibious transport submarine, designated LPSS 574. The project is ambitious. The initial budget is estimated at $15 million, a significant sum for a refurbishment. But as the engineers at Mare Island begin to cut into the hull, the complexity of the task explodes. The conversion is not just a paint job. It is a total structural metamorphosis. The missile rails are ripped out of the hangars. The guidance centers are gutted. In their place, the engineers install racks for equipment, storage lockers for weapons, and, crucially, infrastructure for a new breed of underwater vehicle. The port hangar is kept as a wet hangar, designed to flood and launch swimmer delivery vehicles, SDVs. The starboard hangar undergoes a more radical change. It is converted into a hyperbaric chamber. This is a revolutionary concept. By pressurizing the starboard hangar, the Grayback can host divers who are saturated at depth. They can live in the hangar, exit the submarine to work on the seabed, and return without having to go through hours of decompression every single time. It turns the submarine into a mobile underwater habitat. To accommodate the 67 SEALs and commandos who will ride on her, the hull is actually lengthened. A 12-foot section is inserted into the submarine to add berthing spaces. The sail, the tower of the submarine, is raised by 10 feet to improve surface visibility and house new antennas. The cost balloons. The $15 million estimate vanishes. The final bill exceeds $30 million, double the original projection. The cost overrun is so severe that the Navy cancels the planned conversion of Grayback's sister ship, the USS Growler. The Grayback will be alone, a class of one. The result is a Frankenstein's monster of a ship. She is long, lumpy, and strange. She has the old diesel engines of the 1950s, the hull of a missile boat, and the internal organs of a special operations base. But the transformation is profound. The Grayback is no longer a passive carrier of weapons. She is now an active participant in the war. She is designed to go where other submarines cannot. She is designed to sneak into the enemy's backyard, settle on the bottom, and unleash a swarm of frogmen. The conversion also changes the culture of the boat. A standard submarine crew is a tight-knit technical fraternity. They are engineers and sonar operators. Now they have to share their cramped steel tube with a different breed of warrior. The SEALs who come aboard are different. They are louder. They have different gear. They operate on a different rhythm. The friction between the blue crew, the sailors, and the green crew, the commandos, becomes a defining feature of life aboard the Grayback. The sailors are there to keep the boat alive and hidden. The SEALs are there to leave the boat and find trouble. But technically, the conversion is a marvel. The engineers at Mare Island have built something unique in the U.S. arsenal. No other nation has a dedicated special operations submarine of this capability. The most critical addition is the ability to launch SDVs while submerged. In the past, deploying frogmen from a submarine was a clumsy affair. The sub had to surface, or the divers had to lock out of a small escape trunk one by one, a slow and dangerous process. The Grayback's hangar changes the geometry of deployment. The hangar is huge. It can hold multiple SDVs, small wet submersibles that look like miniature submarines. The process is elegant in theory. The Grayback floods the hangar, the massive outer door opens, the SDVs, with their pilots already breathing on scuba gear, float out into the ocean. The sub never has to surface. The enemy never sees a periscope. This capability is the quiet advantage weaponized. The Grayback can deposit a team of saboteurs miles off an enemy coast, let them drive in on their own mini-subs, plant their explosives or gather their intelligence, and then drive back to the mothership. It extends the reach of the SEALs from hundreds of yards to miles. But theory is clean. Reality is messy. The engineers at Mare Island have built a machine that can do this, but they have not tested it in the unforgiving currents of a war zone. They have not accounted for the fragility of the SDVs or the difficulty of navigating a tiny, battery-powered vehicle in pitch-black water with no GPS. As the Grayback completes her sea trials in 1968 and prepares to deploy to the Pacific, she is carrying a new kind of risk. She is no longer carrying a nuclear warhead that might accidentally detonate. She is carrying 67 men who are eager to fight and a fleet of experimental mini-subs that are barely seaworthy. The strategic panic of the 1950s gave birth to her hull. The tactical desperation of Vietnam has given her a soul. The Grayback is reborn. She is painted black. She runs silent. And she is headed for the South China Sea, where the water is warm, the currents are treacherous, and the enemy is waiting. The Regulus missile required the Grayback to show herself to the world. Her new mission requires her to disappear completely. And as she slips out of San Francisco Bay for the second time in her life, she is heading toward a legacy that will be written not in nuclear fire, but in silence and secrets. The USS Grayback is now a special operations platform, but a platform is useless without a vehicle to deliver the payload. That payload is the Mk7 Swimmer Delivery Vehicle, SDV, a machine that holds the dubious distinction of being one of the most dangerous, uncomfortable, and terrifying devices ever invented for naval warfare. To understand the courage of the men who rode in the Grayback's hangars, you have to understand the SDV. It is not a submarine in the traditional sense. It is not a dry, pressurized capsule where you sit in a leather chair and watch a screen. It is a wet submersible. This means it is free-floating. The hull is full of water. The operators, a pilot and a navigator, plus up to 4 passengers, sit inside, fully submerged, breathing from their own scuba regulators or the vehicle's onboard air supply. The Mark 7 SDV is a fiberglass coffin with a propeller. It is battery-powered, slow, and fragile. It moves at a top speed of about 4 knots, barely a fast walk. Its range is pitifully short, limited by the endurance of its batteries and the cold tolerance of the divers. But the real nightmare of the SDV is navigation. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, there is no GPS. There are no digital chart plotters. When the SDV leaves the safety of the Grayback's hangar, it enters a void. The pilot is flying blind. He steers by a magnetic compass and a depth gauge. He measures distance by time and speed, a method known as dead reckoning. Dead reckoning is an art form, but in the chaotic currents of a coastal war zone, it is a gamble. A current of just 1 knot can push the SDV miles off course over a 2-hour transit. If the pilot misses his target, he doesn't just fail the mission, he might run out of battery power in the middle of the ocean, unable to find the Grayback again. Every launch is a leap of faith. The operators know that once they leave the mothership, they are on their own. There is no radio communication. Radio waves do not travel well through water. They cannot call for help. They cannot ask for a vector. They are untethered astronauts in a hostile, liquid space. The psychological pressure is immense. The SEALs call it the long commute. They sit in the dark, cold water for hours, cramped in a tiny cockpit, watching the glowing radium dials of the compass, praying that the math is right. Every mission profile assumes that rescue is impossible. If the vehicle fails, you swim or you die. If you get lost, you drift until you are captured. This is the weapon system the Grayback carries into Vietnam. In 1970, the Grayback arrives at Subic Bay in the Philippines. This is the forward operating base for the U.S. 7th Fleet. But unlike the aircraft carriers and destroyers that dock openly, the Grayback operates in the shadows. She is assigned to the innocuously named Beach Jumper Unit, a cover for her true role as the primary asset for Naval Special Warfare Group 1. Her theater of operations is the South China Sea and the Gulf of Tonkin. While the carriers launch airstrikes and the battleships pound the coast with artillery, the Grayback fights a different war. It is a black war. Her missions are classified top secret. She deploys for weeks at a time, vanishing from the fleet roster. Her orders come not from the standard chain of command, but often directly from MAC VSOG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group, the covert organization running the secret war across the borders of Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam. The mission types are varied and high risk. Reconnaissance is the bread and butter. The Grayback creeps into shallow water, often settling on the seabed just a few miles off the North Vietnamese coast. She floods her hangar. The SDVs launch. The SEALs motor into the beach, hide their vehicles on the seafloor, and swim ashore. They watch enemy troop movements. They map radar sites. They inspect bridges and logistics hubs. Then they swim back, find their tiny fiberglass subs, and pray they can find the Grayback before dawn. Sabotage is the sharper edge of the sword. The SEALs plant limpets mines on enemy patrol boats. They blow up piers. They destroy sensor arrays. These are direct action missions meant to degrade the enemy's ability to fight without leaving a fingerprint. If successful, the North Vietnamese wake up to find a ship sunk or a bridge dropped, with no sign of an airstrike or artillery barrage. It sows paranoia. But the most ambitious missions are the prisoner snatches. The U.S. military is desperate for intelligence. They want to capture high-ranking North Vietnamese officers or technicians to interrogate them. The Grayback offers a way to do this. A SEAL team can insert, ambush a vehicle convoy or a patrol, grab a prisoner, a snatch, and drag him back to the submarine. It is brutal, intimate violence. Operating in the Gulf of Tonkin is a nightmare for a submarine captain. The water is shallow, often less than 100 feet deep. The bottom is muddy and unpredictable. The acoustic conditions are terrible, and the surface is crawling with fishing boats, sampans, and North Vietnamese patrol craft. For the Grayback, the danger of collision is almost as high as the danger of detection. She is a big boat, over 300 feet long. Maneuvering her in these waters is like driving a bus through a crowded market blindfolded. The bottoming tactic becomes her signature move. When the Grayback reaches her patrol area, she doesn't just hover, she lands. The captain carefully vents ballast until the ship becomes negatively buoyant. She sinks slowly until the keel settles into the mud. Once on the bottom, the crew shuts down everything. The diesel engines are off. The electric motors are off. The ventilation fans are silenced. The only sound is the breathing of the crew and the occasional creak of the hull settling. It is a spooky existence. Inside the submarine, the air grows stale and hot. The CO2 scrubbers work silently. The crew speaks in whispers. Outside, 50 feet above their heads, enemy patrol boats might be passing, their propellers churning the water. The sonar operators listen to the thump, thump, thump of the screws, analyzing the rhythm to determine if it's a fisherman or a gunboat. This is a black operation in the truest sense. Often, friendly units in the area do not know the Grayback is there. This is a terrifying reality of special operations. Blue-on-blue fire. An American destroyer, seeing a periscope or a snorkeling submarine in a free-fire zone, might attack, thinking it's a North Vietnamese intruder. The Grayback has to hide from her own side as much as the enemy. The relationship between the submarine crew and the SEALs solidifies in these tense deployments. The sailors are the bus drivers. The SEALs are the passengers. But the respect grows. The sailors watch the SEALs gear up in the wet hangar. They watch them check their rebreathers, their knives, their silenced weapons. They watch them climb into the cold, dark water of the hangar as it floods. And they wait. The wait is the hardest part for the crew. For 6, 8, sometimes 12 hours, the Grayback sits in the bottom. The captain checks his watch. The navigator checks his plot. Will they come back? Sometimes, the SDVs return with exhausted men, shivering uncontrollably, their hands shredded by coral or wire. Sometimes, the missions are scrubbed due to weather or equipment failure. The SDVs are finicky. The batteries die. The motors flood. But despite the technical glitches, the concept is proven. The Grayback is a ghost ship. She can project power where no one expects it. She is the ultimate asymmetrical weapon. By 1972, the war is turning. The air war over North Vietnam is intensifying. American pilots are being shot down in increasing numbers. The Hanoi Hilton, the infamous Wallow prison, is filling up. The plight of the POWs becomes a central political and military obsession. Rumors begin to circulate in the intelligence community. There are whispers of escapes. There are reports of prisoners planning to break out. The U.S. Navy begins to look for a way to help them. They need a platform that can wait. They need a platform that can get close to the Red River Delta, the escape route from Hanoi, and sit there, unseen, ready to catch a man running for his life. There is only one ship in the fleet capable of this mission. In the spring of 1972, the Grayback receives a new set of orders. It is not a reconnaissance mission. It is not a sabotage mission. It is a rescue mission. The code name is Operation Thunderhead. It is a mission built on hope, desperation, and decaying intelligence. It will be the ultimate test of the Grayback's capabilities. It will test the endurance of her crew, the courage of her SEALs, and the limits of the fragile SDV technology. And it will end in tragedy. As the Grayback turns her bow toward the coast of North Vietnam in June 1972, she is sailing into a perfect storm of operational risk. She is about to attempt the impossible, to intercept 2 men in a river delta in the middle of a war zone, based on a plan that may not even be real. The silence of the Grayback is about to be broken by the sound of failure. Operation Thunderhead is a ghost story before it even begins. It is a mission constructed on a whisper. In the spring of 1972, the intelligence community in Washington receives a signal, fragmented, heavily coded, and incredibly dangerous. The signal suggests that a small group of American prisoners of war held in the Hanoi Hilton are planning an escape. The plan is audacious. They intend to steal a boat, slip into the Red River, and float downstream under the cover of darkness, navigating the heavily patrolled delta until they reach the open sea. If they make it to the mouth of the river, they will be free. But the mouth of the Red River is a chaotic, deadly place. It is a maze of mudflats and fishing weirs, patrolled by North Vietnamese gunboats. If the escapees reach the ocean, they will be exhausted, likely dehydrated, and floating in a small, stolen craft. They will need a miracle to be found. The Navy decides to provide that miracle. The plan calls for a submarine to position itself just off the coast, near the small island of Hanla. From there, SEAL teams will launch, infiltrate the coastal waters, and maintain a vigil. They will watch for the escapees. They will be the safety net. This is the definition of a long shot. The intelligence is not actionable in real time. The Navy doesn't know when the escape will happen, or even if it will happen. They only know a window of time. They have to pre-position assets and wait. The Grayback is the only asset that can do this. An aircraft carrier cannot wait off the coast for weeks without being attacked. A destroyer is too visible. Only the Grayback, with her ability to bottom out and her capacity to launch SDVs, can maintain a covert presence in the enemy's front yard. On June 3, 1972, the Grayback slips into the dark waters of the Gulf of Tonkin. She is carrying UDT-11, Underwater Demolition Team 11, and SEAL Team 1. The atmosphere on board is tense. This is not a standard sneak and peek mission. This is a rescue. The lives of American pilots are on the line. The submarine creeps into shallow water, navigating by sonar and nerve. The captain finds a spot deep enough to hide but shallow enough for the divers. He vents the ballast tanks. The Grayback settles into the mud. The engines die. The boat goes silent. The plan is complex. The SEALs will use the SDVs to travel from the submarine to a small island closer to the river mouth. They will set up a covert observation post, OP, on the island. They will watch the river 24 hours a day. If they see the escapees, they will intercept them and bring them back to the sub. It sounds like a movie script. In reality, it is a logistical nightmare. The first major hurdle is the current. The Gulf of Tonkin is notorious for its fierce tidal currents. The water moves fast, driven by the discharge of the massive Red River and the tides of the South China Sea. On the night of June 3rd, the first attempt is made. The port hangar is flooded. The massive steel door groans open. 4 SEALs, led by Lieutenant Melvin Dry, climb into the Mark 7 SDV. They are wearing wetsuits, rebreathers, and carrying weapons. They slide into the cockpit. The canopy closes. The SDV buzzes out of the hangar. It enters the black void of the ocean. Immediately, things go wrong. The navigational equipment on the Mark 7 SDV is rudimentary. It relies on a fluxgate compass and the pilot's ability to calculate drift. But tonight, the drift is catastrophic. The current is ripping sideways at 2 or 3 knots. The SDV's top speed is only 4 knots. Do the math. If you are driving a car at 40 miles per hour, but the wind is pushing you sideways at 30 miles per hour, you are not going where you point the steering wheel. The pilot fights the stick. He tries to correct. But in the pitch blackness, with no visual reference points, he is disoriented. The SDV is being swept away. Inside the tiny, flooded cockpit, the battery indicator begins to drop. The electric motor is straining against the water. The cold seeps into the divers' bones. They have been underwater for hours, and they are nowhere near their target island. Lieutenant Dry realizes the mission is failing. They are burning battery power just to stay in place. If they continue, they will run out of juice in the middle of the patrol zone. They will be drifting derelicts at dawn. He makes the hard call. Abort. They turn around. They try to find the Grayback. This is the terrifying part of SDV operations. The submarine is silent. It is not emitting a homing beacon because that would attract the enemy. The SDV has to navigate back to a specific set of coordinates and hope the sub is still there. They search. They run grid patterns in the dark. But the current has messed up their dead reckoning. They cannot find the Grayback. The battery is dying. The voltage drops. The lights on the instrument panel dim. The propeller slows to a halt. They are lost. They are 4 men in a fiberglass tube floating underwater in enemy territory. The oxygen in their rebreathers is limited. They have no choice. Surface. The SDV blows its ballast tanks and bobs to the surface. Lieutenant Dry pops the canopy. The fresh air hits their faces, but so does the realization of their exposure. They are floating in the Gulf of Tonkin. It is night, but dawn is coming. They scuttle the SDV. They open the seacocks and let the vehicle sink to the bottom. It is a 50,000 piece of secret technology, but it is dead weight now. The 4 men are now treading water. They are alone. Back on the Grayback, the tension is unbearable. The retrieval time has come and gone. The hangar is open, the lights are on, but the ocean is empty. The captain waits. He gives them an extra hour, then 2. He knows something has gone wrong. The captain of the Grayback faces a decision that defines the burden of command. His primary mission is secrecy. If he surfaces to look for his men, he risks the boat. He risks the 80 other souls on board. He risks being detected by the North Vietnamese radar sites on the coast. But he cannot leave them. He breaks protocol. He orders the Grayback to surface. The submarine rises from the mud. The ballast tanks blow with a roar of white water. The Grayback breaks the surface in the pre-dawn gray. They raise the antennas. They scan the horizon. They use the periscope. Nothing. Then, a stroke of luck. A lookout spots a distress strobe, a tiny flashing light in the vast darkness. The Grayback maneuvers toward the light. It is dangerous. They are exposed. But they find them. The 4 SEALs are pulled from the water, exhausted, hypothermic, but alive. The first attempt has failed. The SDV is gone. The element of surprise is potentially compromised. But the mission is not canceled. The intelligence about the POW escape is still considered valid. The clock is ticking. The failure of the SDV forces a change in strategy. The Navy realizes that the currents are too strong for the underpowered mini-subs. They cannot swim to the observation island. They need another way to get the team there. They look to the sky. The plan is revised. If the Grayback cannot deliver the team, a helicopter will. A Navy helicopter will drop the SEAL team near the island. Then, the team will swim to shore, set up the OP, and wait for the POWs. Once the mission is over, they will swim out to sea and rendezvous with the Grayback for extraction. It seems like a sound adjustment. It uses a faster delivery method to bypass the current. But in the world of special operations, every change in plans introduces new variables. And new variables breed errors. The Grayback moves to a new position, deeper out to sea, to wait for the team's eventual return. Meanwhile, the SEALs prepare for a helicopter insertion. Lieutenant Dry is ready to go again. He is a professional. He shakes off the near-death experience of the failed SDV launch. He is determined to complete the mission. But Operation Thunderhead is cursed by a lack of communication. The different units, the submarine, the helicopter squadron, the fleet command, are operating in silos of secrecy. Information is not flowing freely. On the night of June 5th, the helicopter lifts off from the cruiser USS Long Beach. It is carrying Lieutenant Dry and his team. They are flying low, running dark, heading for the drop zone. The pilots are tired, the visibility is poor, and there is a critical misunderstanding about the drop conditions. The helicopter approaches the water. The pilots are looking for a signal. They see lights in the water, but they are confused. They think they see enemy boats, or maybe fishing buoys. They are flying too fast. A standard cast insertion, where divers jump from a helicopter into the water, is done at a speed of 10 knots, about 11 miles per hour, and a height of 10 feet. It is a gentle drop. The helicopter carrying Lieutenant Dry is moving much faster. The pilots are nervous about the perceived threats. They are flying at combat speed. As the green light comes on, the helicopter is doing nearly 40 knots, and it is higher than 10 feet. In the back, the SEALs cannot see the water. They trust the pilots. They trust the green light. Go, go, go! Lieutenant Melvin Dry steps out of the helicopter door. He expects to hit the water with a splash. Instead, at that speed, water acts like concrete. The physics of the impact are brutal. When a human body hits water at 40 knots, the surface tension does not break easily. Operation Thunderhead has already claimed a vehicle. Now, in the darkness of the Gulf of Tonkin, it is about to claim a life. The difference between a successful combat insertion and a fatal accident is often measured in seconds and knots. On the night of June 5, 1972, inside the cabin of the HH-3A Big Mother helicopter, those measurements are fatally misaligned. The helicopter is thundering through the darkness, low over the Gulf of Tonkin. Inside, Lieutenant Melvin Dry and his team of SEALs are geared up. They are wearing wetsuits, fins, and carrying waterproof packs. They are ready to jump. The plan calls for a helo cast. The helicopter is supposed to slow down to a hover taxi speed of about 10 to 15 knots, flying just 10 feet above the waves. At this speed, the divers can simply step off the ramp, fall for a split second, and enter the water safely. It is a technique they have practiced dozens of times. But tonight, the sensory cues are missing. It is pitch black. The water below is invisible. There is no horizon. The pilots, flying on instruments and adrenaline, are under the impression they are under fire or being tracked. They are anxious to drop the team and get out of the kill zone. There is a tragic breakdown in communication. The pilots believe they have slowed down enough. The instruments might even suggest it, or perhaps the wind speed is masking the ground speed. But the reality is stark. The helicopter is moving at nearly 40 knots. 40 knots is roughly 46 miles per hour. It is highway speed. When the green jump light flares in the cabin, Lieutenant Dry doesn't hesitate. He is the leader. He goes first. He steps off the ramp into the void. At 10 knots, water is fluid. You displace it. At 40 knots, water is a solid. It resists impact with the force of a brick wall. Lieutenant Dry hits the surface of the Gulf of Tonkin with horrific violence. The impact is catastrophic. The sudden deceleration snaps his neck. The trauma is massive and instantaneous. He is killed not by a bullet, but by the physics of his own insertion. Behind him, the other members of the team are jumping. They, too, are hammered by the water. They tumble, their masks ripped off, their gear scattered. Bones are bruised, muscles torn. They surface in agony, gasping for air, disoriented by the sheer violence of the landing. "Where is the LT?" The shout goes out over the roar of the departing helicopter rotors. The SEALs tread water, scanning the darkness. They find him floating, face down. Warrant Officer Philip Moki Martin, a legendary figure in the SEAL community, swims to Dry. He rolls him over. There is no response. No breathing. No pulse. The mission has collapsed in seconds. They are miles from the target island. They are battered, their equipment is lost or damaged, and their commander is dead. But the ordeal is just beginning. They are in enemy waters. The North Vietnamese patrol boats are active. The current that doomed the SDV mission is still ripping through the Gulf. Moki Martin takes charge. He refuses to abandon Lieutenant Dry's body. The SEAL ethos, leave no man behind, is absolute, even in death. Martin and the surviving team members gather around Dry. They inflate their life vests. They tether themselves together. For the next 8 hours, they drift. Imagine the psychological weight of this night. They are floating in the black ocean, holding on to the body of their friend, watching the lights of enemy gunboats sweep the horizon. They are waiting for dawn, knowing that daylight brings exposure. They cannot swim to the island. They cannot complete the mission. They can only survive. Eventually, a search and rescue helicopter, alerted by the team's emergency radio beacon, locates them. The rescue is harrowing, but successful. The team is hoisted out of the water. Lieutenant Dry's body is recovered. Melvin Dry becomes the last Navy SEAL to die during the Vietnam War. His death is classified. The details are buried in reports marked top secret. To the outside world, he died in a training accident. The true nature of Operation Thunderhead remains a secret for decades. But the tragedy of Operation Thunderhead is not just the death of a good officer. It is the futility of the entire endeavor. While the Grayback was prowling the bottom of the ocean, while the SDVs were failing, and while Lieutenant Dry was dying, the situation inside the Hanoi Hilton had already changed. The intelligence that launched the mission was real, but it was old. The POWs had planned an escape. It was a serious plan, but weeks before the Grayback arrived, the prison leadership, the senior American officers held captive, had reviewed the plan and canceled it. They had determined that the risk was too high. They feared that a failed escape would result in severe reprisals against the remaining prisoners. They feared that the escapees would likely be captured or killed in the Delta. So, the order was given internally: stand down, no escape. But there was no way to communicate this to the CIA or the Navy. The prisoners had no radio. They had no way to signal the outside world that the operation was off. So, the massive machinery of the U.S. military continued to grind forward based on a ghost plan. The Grayback, the SEALs, the helicopters, it was all a rescue effort for men who were sitting in their cells, completely unaware that people were dying to save them. This is the bitter truth of Operation Thunderhead. It was a mission built on a silence that could not be bridged. The Grayback returns to Subic Bay in silence. The mood on the boat is somber. The loss of Lieutenant Dry hits the crew hard. They had eaten with him, briefed with him, watched him gear up in the hangar. The special operations community is small. A death like this leaves a scar. But the war does not stop for grief. The Grayback continues her deployments. She goes back out. She launches more SDVs. She drops more SEALs. She proves, time and again, that the concept works even if the technology is imperfect. She becomes the testing ground for the future of naval special warfare. Every failure in Vietnam teaches a lesson. The Navy learns that SDVs need better navigation systems. They learn that currents must be modeled more accurately. They learn that helocasting at night requires better coordination. The Grayback serves as the laboratory where these painful lessons are codified into doctrine. But the strain of operations begins to show on the ship herself. By the mid-1970s, the Grayback is an old lady. Her hull has been cut, welded, pressurized, and beaten by the sea. Her diesel engines, designed in the 1940s, are tired. The salt water is eating at her pipes. Following the end of the Vietnam War, the Grayback does not retire. She finds a new role in the Cold War shadow games of the 1980s. She continues to train with SEAL teams. She continues to develop the SDV program. But the danger of the wet Navy never goes away. The ocean is unforgiving of mistakes, whether in combat or in training. In 1982, 10 years after the death of Lieutenant Dry, the Grayback is involved in another tragedy. This one does not happen in enemy waters. It happens in the safety of a training exercise. And it happens because of a mechanical failure in the very system that made her unique, the hangar. The incident occurs off the coast of Subic Bay. The Grayback is submerged. 5 Navy divers are inside the starboard hangar, the one converted into a hyperbaric chamber. They are preparing for a lockout dive. The chamber is pressurized. The divers are drained of nitrogen, ready to go. Then, something goes wrong with the drain valve. To flood or drain the hangar, there is a complex system of valves and interlocks. It is a system that relies on vacuum suction to remove the water. In a catastrophic sequence of events, a valve is opened while the chamber is still under partial vacuum, or perhaps the pressure differential creates a suction force that was not anticipated. The details are technical and horrifying. The result is a sudden, violent depressurization. In diving, pressure is life. If you drop the pressure too fast, the gas inside a human body expands explosively. The 5 divers inside the chamber die instantly. It is a gruesome, heartbreaking accident. 5 more names are added to the list of men the Grayback has claimed. The investigation reveals systemic issues: training fatigue, poorly designed valve indicators. The complexity of the Grayback's conversion has created a system that is unforgiving of human error. This disaster is the beginning of the end. The Navy looks at the Grayback and sees a ship that is too old, too weird, and too dangerous. She is a relic of the 1950s trying to survive in the 1980s. The technology has moved on. The Los Angeles-class nuclear submarines are entering service, and the Navy is developing dry deck shelters, DDS, that can be strapped to their backs, rendering the Grayback's internal hangars obsolete. In 1984, the order comes down: decommission her. The USS Grayback is stripped of her sensitive equipment. Her flags are lowered. The crew marches off for the last time. There is talk of turning her into a museum. She is, after all, unique. She is the only submarine of her kind. She carried the Regulus. She fought in Vietnam. She birthed the modern SDV program. She is a piece of history. But the Navy says no. She is too modified. The missile heritage has been erased by the special ops conversion. And perhaps there is a sense that her history is too dark, too classified to be put on display for tourists. Instead, the Navy decides to give her a warrior's death. She will not be scrapped. She will not be turned into razor blades. She will be used one last time to teach the fleet how to fight. She is designated as a target ship. In 1986, the empty, rusting hulk of the Grayback is towed out to sea near the Philippines. She is set adrift in deep water. She is silent now. No engines, no crew, no ghosts. The exercise is RIMPAC 86. The fleet is assembled. They are going to use her to test a new generation of weapons. First, they fire guns at her. But the Grayback is tough. She was built in the 1950s, in an era when steel was cheap and designers believed in mass. Her pressure hull is thick, high-tensile steel, designed to withstand the crushing weight of the deep ocean. The high-explosive shells from the destroyers shred her superstructure. They punch holes in the sail. They tear apart the casing around the missile hangars, but they do not break her back. She bobs in the swell, stubborn to the end. Then, an American submarine moves into position. It is a nuclear attack boat, the kind that replaced her. It fires a Mark 48 torpedo. The Mark 48 is a ship killer. It doesn't just hit the hull. It swims under the keel and detonates upward. The explosion creates a massive gas bubble that lifts the ship out of the water and then drops it, breaking the keel's back. The torpedo runs true. The explosion is massive. A geyser of white water erupts. The Grayback is lifted, broken, and slammed back down. She breaks in two. The bow section, with those famous, cursed hangars, points toward the sky for a moment, then slides under. The stern follows. The USS Grayback begins her final dive. She descends through the blue, then the black, falling 2 miles down to the bottom of the Pacific. She lands in the silence of the abyss. Her career is over. But her legacy is just beginning to be understood. The end of the Vietnam War does not bring peace to the USS Grayback. For most warships, the end of a conflict signals a return to routine patrols or a slow slide into reserve status. But for a ship as unique as the Grayback, There is no such thing as routine. By 1975, she is an anomaly in the U.S. Navy. The fleet is rapidly modernizing. The new Spruance-class destroyers and Los Angeles-class nuclear submarines are entering service, sleek, computerized, and powerful. The Grayback, by comparison, is a dinosaur. She is a diesel-electric relic in a nuclear world. Her engines rattle, her hull groans. Her internal piping, subjected to years of saltwater corrosion, is becoming a maintenance nightmare. Yet, the Navy cannot let her go. She possesses a capability that no billion-dollar nuclear submarine can match: those hangars. In the shadow world of the late Cold War, the need for covert insertion is growing, not shrinking. The Soviet Union is expanding its naval presence. Tensions are high in Korea. The Grayback remains the only platform capable of delivering a large SEAL team and their vehicles completely unseen. So, she has worked hard. She becomes a school ship for the darkest arts of naval warfare. She spends her time in the waters off the Philippines and Okinawa, refining the doctrine of underwater infiltration. It is on the Grayback that the Navy learns how to truly integrate special operations with submarine warfare. They test new generations of swimmer delivery vehicles, SDVs. They practice locking out divers at night. They run endless drills on bottoming in hostile currents. But the years of hard use are taking a toll. The conversion in 1967 was extensive, but it was essentially a prototype modification. The systems were complex and often improvised. As the 1970s bleed into the 1980s, the prototype nature of the ship begins to show its teeth. The equipment is tired, the valves are sticky, the gauges are old, and in the unforgiving environment of high-pressure diving, tired equipment is deadly. On January 16, 1982, the Grayback is operating off the coast of Subic Bay in the Philippines. It is a training mission, designated as a routine exercise. The sea is calm, the sun is shining, there is no enemy. But inside the submarine, 5 men are preparing to enter a zone as dangerous as any battlefield. The men are Navy divers. They are elite. Their job is to test the limits of human endurance underwater. They are assigned to the starboard hangar, the one converted into a hyperbaric chamber. The mission for the day involves a lockout. The plan is for the divers to enter the chamber, pressurize it to match the depth of the water outside, open the hatch, swim out, perform a task, and then return. It is a procedure they have done before. The 5 men climb into the chamber. They are a mix of seasoned veterans and younger divers. They are joking, checking their gear, settling into the cramped steel cylinder. The heavy steel door is swung shut and sealed. Inside the submarine, the diving supervisor takes his station at the control panel. This panel is a maze of valves, gauges, and levers. It controls the flow of air, water, and mixed gas into the chamber. It is the life support system for the men inside. The chamber is pressurized. The air hisses as it fills the space. The needles on the depth gauges climb. The divers equalize their ears. They are now at depth, even though they haven't left the ship. Their bodies are saturated with nitrogen. The next step is to drain the water from the wet portion of the hangar to allow the divers to prepare the equipment. To do this, a vacuum system is often used to suck the water out against the pressure of the sea. This is where the physics of the Grayback's age and complexity collide with human error. The sequence of events is rapid and confusing. There is a misunderstanding about the state of a valve. A drain valve connected to a suction line is manipulated. Normally, there are interlocks, mechanical safeties, that prevent a valve from being opened if there is a dangerous pressure differential. But on an old, modified ship, interlocks can wear out, or they can be bypassed. Or the design itself might be flawed, relying too heavily on the operator to know the exact state of the system. In a split second, a connection is made between the high-pressure environment of the chamber and a low-pressure void. The result is catastrophic, explosive depressurization. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere is instantly sucked out. The pressure drops from several atmospheres to a near vacuum in the blink of an eye. The human body cannot survive this. The air in the diver's lungs expands violently. The nitrogen dissolved in their blood bubbles out instantly, turning their blood into froth. It is not a slow suffocation. It is a massive physical trauma. The 5 men, Richard Bond, Richard Hawking, John Sun, William Slattery, and David Winters, die instantly. Outside the chamber, the crew hears the thump of the pressure wave. Alarms scream. The diving supervisor tries to reverse the valve, but it is too late. The physics have already done their work. When the chamber is finally opened, the scene is horrific. 5 young men, in the prime of their lives, are gone. The tragedy sends a shock wave through the Navy. The Grayback is immediately ordered back to port. An investigation is launched. The inquiry reveals a disturbing picture. It finds that while the immediate cause was a valve error, the root cause was systemic. The Grayback's diving system was overly complex. The training manuals were outdated. The safeguards were insufficient for the level of risk involved. It is a bitter echo of the Shinano tragedy decades earlier. A complex system failing because the human element could not keep up with the engineering demands. The deaths of the Grayback 5 cast a long shadow over the ship. The crew is devastated. These were their shipmates. They ate in the same mess hall. They watched movies together. Now, the starboard hangar is a tomb. The Navy faces a hard decision. The Grayback is unique, yes. But is she worth the blood? She is 24 years old. In submarine years, that is ancient. Her hull has undergone thousands of compression cycles. Her wiring is brittle. And now, she has killed 5 of her own in a peacetime accident. The accident breaks the spell. The allure of the Grayback's unique capabilities is outweighed by the liability she represents. The Navy realizes that keeping this Frankenstein ship alive is no longer viable. Technology has finally caught up. The new Los Angeles-class submarines are being fitted with dry deck shelters, DDS, that can be strapped to their backs, rendering the Grayback's internal hangars obsolete. The Grayback has served her purpose. She has bridged the gap. She kept the concept of submarine-based special operations alive during the lean years. But the bridge is crumbling. For the next 2 years, she lingers in service, but the spirit is gone. She is a ship marked by tragedy. In 1984, the final order comes. Prepare for decommissioning. The process is somber. The Grayback returns to Subic Bay, her home away from home. The sensitive equipment is stripped out. The classified radios are removed. The specialized diving gear, the very gear that cost 5 men their lives, is dismantled. On January 15, 1984, almost exactly 2 years after the accident, the commissioning pennant is hauled down for the last time. The crew walks off the brow. The reactorless engine room goes silent forever. But the Grayback is not destined for a museum. There is talk of preserving her. Veterans groups argue that she is a unique piece of Cold War history. She is the only Regulus boat left. She is the only special ops sub of her kind. But the Navy is unsentimental about its failures. And the Grayback, for all her successes, is viewed through the lens of her accidents. The conversion had gutted her original missile configuration so thoroughly that restoring her to her 1958 appearance would be prohibitively expensive. And restoring her to her Vietnam configuration would mean preserving a highly classified and tragic interior that the Navy perhaps wants to forget. So, she is towed away. She is placed in the storage fleet, floating quietly among other ghosts. She waits there for 2 years. A gray, rusting hulk. The paint peels. The seagulls nest on the sail. The hangars that once held nuclear fire and then held secret warriors are now empty, echoing with the sound of the wind. But the Navy has one last use for her. A warrior should die a warrior's death. The Grayback will not be cut apart by torches in a scrapyard. She will not be turned into razor blades. In 1986, the orders are cut for Exercise Rimpak. The Pacific Fleet is gathering for a massive show of force. They need a target. They need something big, tough, and submarine-shaped to test their new weapons against. The USS Grayback is selected. She is towed out of the harbor. She is stripped of hazardous materials. Her fuel tanks are flushed. She is a hollow shell now. As she is pulled out into the deep water of the South China Sea, near the very waters where she once prowled on secret missions, she looks small against the vastness of the ocean. The tow line is dropped. She drifts. The fleet forms up. The destroyers, the cruisers, the aircraft carriers, and below the surface, the nuclear attack submarines. The Grayback is about to face the firepower of the future she helped create. The end of a warship is usually a bureaucratic affair, signed off on paper in a quiet office. But the physical end of the USS Grayback is a violent, thunderous event that shakes the ocean floor. It is April 13, 1986. The location is the South China Sea, just off the coast of Subic Bay, the very waters the Grayback prowled for decades as a ghost. She is drifting now, a dead ship. Her hatches are welded shut. Her fuel bunkers are empty. She is listing slightly in the swell, a gray, rusting monolith against the deep blue water. The exercise is Rimpak 86. The U.S. Navy has assembled a firing squad. First, the surface ships take their turn. It is a test of gunnery. Destroyers line up and open fire with their 5-inch guns. The shells scream across the water and slam into the Grayback's hull. But the Grayback is stubborn. She was built in the 1950s, in an era when steel was cheap and designers believed in mass. Her pressure hull is thick, high-tensile steel, designed to withstand the crushing weight of the deep ocean. The high-explosive shells from the destroyers shred her superstructure. They punch holes in the sail. They tear apart the casing around the missile hangars. But they do not break her back. She absorbs the punishment. She bobs in the water, smoking and scarred, but refusing to sink. It is a final act of defiance from the old diesel boat. She seems to be saying to the modern fleet, "Is that all you have?" The fleet commanders realize that gunfire isn't going to do it. To kill a submarine, you need a submarine. Beneath the surface, the USS Blueback, another diesel submarine, acting as the executioner, moves into position. But the real killing blow is assigned to the air. An aircraft, likely a P-3 Orion or a helicopter carrying a Mark 48 torpedo, begins its run. The Mark 48 is a terrifying weapon. It is wire-guided, smart, and fast. It is designed to break the spine of a ship. It doesn't just impact the side. It is programmed to swim under the keel of the target and detonate upward. The torpedo hits the water. Its propeller spins up to high speed. It closes the distance in seconds. The explosion is massive. A geyser of white water shoots hundreds of feet into the air. The shockwave lifts the Grayback, a ship of nearly 4,000 tons, bodily out of the water. The physics are brutal. The gas bubble from the warhead expands under the center of the ship, lifting it up, while gravity pulls the bow and stern down. The keel snaps. The Grayback breaks in two. The bow section, heavy with the weight of those famous missile hangars, tips forward. For a brief moment, the strange bulbous nose of the submarine points vertically at the sky, as if taking one last look at the world. Then, with a rush of escaping air, it slides beneath the surface. The stern follows seconds later. The USS Grayback begins her final descent. She falls through the blue light of the surface, down into the twilight zone, and finally into the eternal darkness of the abyss. She comes to rest thousands of feet down, on the silt of the ocean floor. The silence returns to the South China Sea. The target is destroyed. The exercise is a success. But what does it mean? Why does the story of this strange, ugly, unlucky submarine matter? The Grayback left no monuments. There is no museum where you can walk her decks. She exists only in grainy black and white photos and the classified files of the U.S. Navy. Yet, her legacy is everywhere in the modern fleet. First, the Grayback proved a fundamental truth. Submarines are not just for sinking ships. Before the Grayback, a submarine was a hunter-killer. Its job was to torpedo other ships. The Grayback proved that a submarine could be a transport. It proved that the greatest weapon a submarine can carry is not a missile, but a team of operators. She proved that you can project power onto the shore without ever surfacing. Today, every Virginia-class and Ohio-class guided missile submarine, SSGN, in the U.S. Navy carries this DNA. The dry deck shelters, DDS, attached to modern nuclear subs, are the direct descendants of the Grayback's hangars. The doctrine of launching SDVs from submerged boats was written in blood by the crew of the Grayback. Second, she validated the concept of the swimmer delivery vehicle. The early SDVs were death traps. They were unreliable and dangerous. But because the Grayback provided a platform to test them in real-world conditions, the technology improved. The failures in Vietnam, the drifting in the current, the dead batteries, all of that data was used to build the advanced SEAL delivery vehicles of today. The modern Mk-8 and the new dry mini-subs are safer and more capable because of the Grayback crews suffered through the Mk-7 era. But the most profound legacy of the Grayback is human. It is the story of the men who served on her. It is the story of the blue crew and the green crew learning to work together. It is the story of Lieutenant Melvin Dry, who died trying to save his comrades. It is the story of the 5 divers who died in the hangar in 1982. These men were pioneers in a type of warfare that no one was supposed to see. They didn't get parades. When the Grayback came home from Vietnam, there were no banners. When she came home from her secret missions in the 80s, there were no news crews. They fought in the dark. The Grayback was a ship of contradictions. She was built for a nuclear war that never happened, and she fought a secret war that few understood. She was a technological failure as a missile boat, but an operational triumph as a commando carrier. She was a place of innovation and a place of tragedy. As we look back at her story, we see the evolution of the Cold War itself. It started with the brute force of megaton missiles, clumsy, loud, and terrifying. It evolved into the precise, quiet violence of special operations, shadowy, complex, and human-centric. The Grayback was the bridge between those two worlds. She did not win wars in the traditional sense. She didn't sink an enemy fleet. She didn't level a city. Instead, she proved how modern wars would be fought. In silence, in the dark, by small teams of men appearing from nowhere and vanishing back into the sea. The USS Grayback is gone. Her steel is slowly dissolving into the ocean floor. But every time a Navy SEAL locks out of a submarine in the dead of night, every time a silent black shape slips into an enemy harbor unseen, the ghost of the Grayback is there. She was the ugly duckling that taught the Navy how to hunt in the dark. History often focuses on the champions, the ships that won the decisive battles, the designs that were perfect from day one. But there is a special kind of honor in the hybrids, the stopgaps, and the experiments. The Grayback was never perfect. She was a mechanical improvisation. She leaked. She broke. She killed her own men. But she was there. When the Navy needed a nuclear deterrent it didn't have, she carried the missile. When the Navy needed to rescue POWs in Vietnam, she carried the SEALs. When the Navy needed to learn how to fight underwater, she provided the classroom. She was a ship that did the dirty work of history. We honor her not for her perfection, but for her persistence. And we honor the men who walked her decks, knowing that they were riding a machine that was always pushing the edge of what was possible. Thank you for spending part of your day with us to uncover the story of the USS Grayback. If this journey into the silent service meant something to you, we'd be honored to have you with us again. Until next time, stay curious and take good care.